On a spring night in 1966, an 11-year-old girl was startled from her bed by a bright light flashing through the window of her home in Beverly, Massachusetts. She looked out and saw a strange, egg-shaped aircraft about the size of a car with multicolored lights flashing. The object, which seemed straight from a science fiction movie, seemed to pose no threat to her. She watched as it flew just above the rooftops of nearby homes, then appeared to land in the football field of the local high school. The girl's name was Nancy Modugno, and she was one of at least 9 witnesses to what became known as the Beverly UFO. Nancy immediately rushed downstairs and told her father what she had just seen. Her father half listened while he tried to adjust the controls on the TV he'd been watching. The picture had suddenly become fuzzy, as if the object hovering outside might have interfered with the reception. But Nancy's mother looked out the window towards Beverly High School and confirmed that there were brightly lit objects with flashing lights flying above. She assured her daughter that it was probably just an airplane making an emergency landing, obviously not a flying saucer. But she was curious. So along with 2 neighborhood friends, Claire Modugno headed over to the high school to get a closer look. When the 3 women reached the field, they saw something completely unexpected. Not 1, but 3 aircraft hovering over the area, each fitting the exact description that Nancy had given. As they watched, the craft seemed to circle them. One descended so close that the woman took off running, but not before observing a few more details. The object appeared solid, white, and disc-like in shape. By then, a small crowd had formed near the high school field. They watched as the objects ascended into the sky. The police were even called, but by the time they had arrived, the crafts were so high they appeared as small, faint, disc-shaped lights. The officers were unimpressed. Small objects could have been just about anything as far as they were concerned, but to their shock, one of the discs suddenly turned bright red and descended back down towards the school. One of the police officers would later describe the large, plate-like object with multicolored lights noiselessly gliding back and forth over the school. Upon the arrival of the U.S. Air Force helicopter, the 3 objects flew upwards and out of sight. What flew over the skies of Beverly that night remains unclear. An official investigation was conducted by the Connecticut Committee, a U.S. military-funded organization who had studied UFO reports in the mid-1960s. They concluded that the mysterious objects witnessed by these sound-minded citizens and police officers were apparently the planet Jupiter. Just over a year after the UFO sighting in Beverly, Massachusetts, another teenage girl looked out her bedroom window and saw something inexplicable. This sighting took place on a farm in a rural area just outside of Winsted, Connecticut. For decades, the state of Connecticut has been a major hotspot for UFO sightings, but one detail about this one makes it extremely unusual. On the night of September 15, 1967, a woman stepped outside of her house and spotted a brightly lit object hovering over a pasture in her neighbor's farmyard. It was egg-shaped and about the size of a small car. Terrified, she went back inside and locked the door. Meanwhile, across the street, 14-year-old Carol Luke and her friend Ruth Bassini were watching the object from Carol's second-floor bedroom. The girls were home alone, and when Carol had first caught sight of the light, she thought it was the headlights of her mother's car. For about a half hour, the girls watched in fear and fascination as the giant egg hovered between the barn and the backyard hill. It repeatedly brightened and then dimmed, making no sound that they could hear from the window. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a loud motor starting up. It didn't seem to come from the object, but rather from the nearby barn. As the girls turned their attention to the barn, they were stunned to see 2 people walking out of it. It was hard for the girls to make out distinct features as the people walked across the darkened yard, but they were able to observe unnaturally large heads on small, short bodies. With 2 little people walked from the barn to the mailbox, then crossed the road. Within a few minutes, the headlights of an approaching car caused them to run back towards the barn, as if they were wanting to be avoided being spotted. As they ran, they were joined by a third person of the same size. Meanwhile, the object in the pasture went dark, also in seeming response to the passing car. The girls' last glimpse of the strange people caught them heading towards the object in the pasture. They watched as it lit up again and slowly rose, drifting off into the night sky. Mrs. Luke arrived home, and the girls excitedly directed her attention to the object as it flew away. The local police investigated, but were unable to learn anything of importance or find any evidence of the night's strange events. It is known that several people reported a glowing red, clam-shaped object in the sky less than a mile from the Luke property that night. This occurred at about 7:30 p.m., an hour and a half before the girls spotted the object in the barnyard. Ultimately, whatever and whoever visited the Luke family's farmyard that night still remains a mystery.